You know how I know today is going to be a good day? My partner, Damichael Cole, is back on Locked On Grizzlies. It's going to be a good day because of that. And it's also going to be a good day because you're here with us as well. We are going to talk about two players in particular that are going to be massive to the Memphis Grizzlies, finding their footing, getting things straight, and staying near the top of the Western Conference. We're going to talk all that and more here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Ja Morant. So happy to be able to say co-host on this Thursday episode because Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal is back, and we'll welcome him back properly here in a moment. But first, I want to thank you for wherever you're checking out this podcast, making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, do all of those things and help us continue to grow and get better here at Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Damichael Cole, I know it has been a tough several days for you and your family. But hopefully, obviously, you have more important things to do than check out comments on YouTube. But there's been a lot of love sent your way here. And obviously, you know, we've been thinking of you, and we're just so glad that you're back. And, you know, we're excited to get you back into the swing here. I know it's tough, but you have a lot of support here on Locked On Grizzlies. So it's good to see you again, my friend.
Joe, for one, you know, as I was telling you, I appreciate you so much. I mean, you know, I saw the comments, man. Everyone, you know, shout out to Joe for holding it down, you know, the way he has over this stretch. And, you know, my personal thank you to the Locked On Grizzlies viewers. You know, thank you for all your support. You know, as I said, you know, in a message on Twitter, I know some of you aren't, you know, on Twitter, but I've read all the comments. I looked at the Locked On Grizzlies comments. I read all the Twitter comments and everywhere else. And, you know, I truly appreciate it. Appreciate the support. It means a lot. You know, as, you know, many of you can attest, you know, when you're grieving the loss of a loved one, there is no correct definition of how to do that. You just go along with the process, and I will say, you know, for me and the family, we're progressing and we're processing everything, and you know what, you know, life goes on. At the end of the day, you have to continue to live, and you know, my big brother was someone who bragged on me continuously to all his friends. It was so many times that people I had never seen before in my life would come up to me and say something like, yeah, you're Damichael, you do this with the Grizzlies or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how do you know? It's like, well, your brother told me. And you know, so I kind of take heed to those things, and we're going to keep the train rolling. But again, appreciate you all as well, just for all the love and thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely. Well, they're you know, your brother was proud of you, well-deserved. And, you know, I know you're going to continue to keep him with you and all those sorts of things moving forward. So Damichael back on this episode, there might be an episode or two where he's in and out and all that sort of thing. He'll be back full-time eventually, but I was very happy that he was able to join me on this episode today. And we have a lot to cover over the next several times we're together again. Yeah. But because of the fact that there's actual Grizzlies basketball today, they're back after a week off, we figured we would focus on that. And on yesterday's episode, Damichael, I talked about the fact that the Grizzlies have a schedule ahead of them that's relatively easy, and it seems unlikely that they'll finish below 500 as part of that schedule. 13-12, you know, is kind of what I predicted yesterday, or 14-11, something along those lines. And if they are that means the Sacramento Kings have to, you know, go 17-8 or something like that in order just to tie the Grizzlies. And the Kings have one of the toughest schedules in the Western Conference. Right. So that was kind of the theme of yesterday's show. But going into today, I wanted to talk about players that were going to be integral to that actually happening, right? Because Memphis was 4-9 over their last 13 going into the All-Star break. They had that 8 losses in 9 game stretch before they won 3 of their last 4 going into the break. So players that kind of need to get it together a little bit, or players that need to step up or step back on the court physically. Yeah. One of the names that I wanted to talk about on this episode was Dillon Brooks, and I wrote about him over on my Written in the Dark Substack for my Wednesday post. He is having literally the worst season of his career, offensively at least. He's still a net positive for the team. His efficiency differential is still around +6, which is impressive considering he is like in the 8th percentile in points per shot attempt. He is just below his career averages across the board. And I think that for Dillon, the time away this week, hopefully it was kind of a reset. It was a clearing of the mind and the heart and the soul, the basketball soul at least, and a chance for him to recharge and rejuvenate, but also kind of refocus on when he has been better offensively. Because let's not get it twisted, he's never been awesome, right? He's never been an efficient basketball player offensively. But when he has been closer to that definition, it's been when he's used his body the same way that he does on defense on the offensive end, getting to the rim more consistently, being physical with the rim, using that body that he's so physical with on the defensive side in offensive sets. He's settled for a lot more jumpers and long-range shots than he has in recent years. And I think that for the Grizzlies to be able to keep that 13-12 or better energy, right? Because that's on the low end.
That's the low end, right?
538 has the Grizzlies going 51-31, which would mean the Grizzlies go, off the top of my head, that'd be 16-9, I think, which would be a really strong finish to the season. And that would certainly make them the 2 seed in the Western Conference. I think Dillon Brooks is a massive part of that. What about you?
Dillon Brooks is a huge part of it. And it's just look at the landscape, right? If you look around the Western Conference, we always talk about why these Grizzlies starters, each starter is important for a particular reason. Dillon Brooks, in his case, it's the wing defense, right? Ja, has been, having a better defensive season this year, all things considered. Desmond Bane, has been serviceable on that end, but neither of them are guys you're going to say, hey, go stop Paul George, go stop Kawhi Leonard, go stop Kevin Durant, go stop Devin Booker, go stop, Jamal Murray, go stop Luka, go stop Kyrie. Right. I mean, the list goes on.
Absolutely.
And that's, you talk about the second half of the schedule. You got to play the Clippers. What is it, two or 3 times?
I think it's 3 times.
Yeah. And then the Mavs, same thing, 3 times against the Mavs. So you got 3 games in March against the Mavs, 3 games against the Clippers. That's 6 games right there where you're going against Kyrie, Luka, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard.
Assuming Kawhi plays in all 3 of those games.
And that's my point. Even if he doesn't, you're going against Paul George. And even if Luka or Kyrie misses a game, you're going to need Dillon Brooks at the end of the day on that end defensively to really lock in. And you mentioned he's having probably his worst basketball season offensively. I mean, even his, one thing that was going for him is I felt like he was getting to the line a little bit better. I think he's averaging pretty much like 2.3 free throw attempts per game right now, which is even lower, for him, just in his career at this point. And then, the 3-point shooting, I think he's at 31%. The last 2 seasons, his 3-point shooting is well below, and he was 35% career up to that point. And that looks like, amazing numbers compared to where he's been at the last couple seasons. But at the end of the day, you mentioned it, talking about, getting back to the means in a way for Dillon Brooks. He's been really bad offensively lately. He probably won't be this bad, over the course, of the totality, of the season. So there isn't room for improvement on the offensive end, but you're going to need him badly in these defensive matchups. And the perfect example for me is I laughed when this happened during the season. Early on in the season, they played the Mavs, right? Dillon Brooks didn't play. And I remember, off the top of my head, I never try to generalize the fan base because there's a lot of split opinions on Dillon Brooks. But I remember some people, I'll say it like that, some people were like, oh, Dillon's out. No big deal. No big deal. And if you remember, Luka toyed with the Grizzlies. I mean, that game, it just first quarter, second quarter, it was like, okay, I want to shoot over here this time. All right, I shot over here 2 times. Let me go to the left this time.
He played with his food the entire game.
It was child's play. And he had fun out there. And it's like, man, Dillon Brooks would have at least, made him work for it. He would have broke a sweat. So having him for that matchup, having him potentially against a Kyrie when Kyrie gets hot and Luka's having the off night, you can say, okay, well, let's just switch him on to Kyrie, and vice versa with the Clippers. Those are two teams they're going to see a lot of. They're going to see the Nuggets a couple times as well. Jamal Murray is no slouch. He's starting to round into form. You're going to need Dillon Brooks big time in these matchups, and you can depend on that of the backcourt. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane pick up the offensive load. Jaren Jackson Jr. is coming to his own offensively. You have enough on that end, but you need Dillon on defense.
To your point about the free throw shooting, and this also goes along with him not using his frame to get to the rim. Yeah. This is per basketballreference.com. Per 100 possessions, Dillon Brooks is only taking 3.5 free throws a game. That is the worst of his career, even lower than his rookie season. So he needs to use his body and his physicality on the offensive end, getting to the basket in a similar way that he uses it on the defensive side of things. We're going to talk more about another player who just his physical return will help the Grizzlies immensely trying to hold on to that 2 seed heading into this sprint these last couple of months, 7 or 8 weeks toward the playoffs next year on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here, even beyond that, right? We're in the final stretch. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. You download the FanDuel Sports Bet app that is safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on everything from money line to point scores, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes, player points, rebounds, assists, literally almost anything you want over at FanDuel. It lets you even combine some of those bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Steven Adams, you New Zealand, you Kiwi lovers, we miss him, and we're going to talk about him next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, writing over at Fansided, writing over at SB Nation NBA, have a Substack written in the dark over that you should check out. That's my Memphis Grizzlies specific content, all sorts of things. But of course, my main focus Grizzlies-wise is here on Locked On Grizzlies with my co-host, who is back, the Grizzlies beat writer over at the Commercial Appeal, Damichael. So happy to have him on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, talking players that need to step up, right? Dillon Brooks was the focus earlier on in the show. Now we're going to talk about Steven Adams. And in fairness to Steven Adams, him stepping up is just physically being able to move his leg, right? Just bending his knee. Still out for the 76ers game, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment when we preview Grizzlies-Sixers. Steven Adams out with that PCL sprain still, and it sounds like the earliest he will be back will perhaps be Tuesday of next week against the Lakers. With Steven Adams, he matters so much in terms of not just allowing for the defense to be more stout, letting Jaren be that free safety, to use a football analogy. Mm-hmm. He matters offensively. I think that a lot of the, over at my Substack, I wrote about Desmond Bane scoring less. Part of that is Steven Adams not getting extra possessions or not creating screens or not facilitating offense for Desmond Bane. One of the better passers, not named Ja Morant, on Desmond Bane made buckets is Steven Adams. They have a pretty impressive chemistry on that side of the floor. So Adams, for his flaws, and he certainly has those, thinking back to the playoffs last year, he matters immensely to this team, not just on defense, but on offense, not just in terms of rebounding, but in screening. The sooner he is able to get back on the court, the better. But the thing about Steven Adams, I know you know this, Damichael, I thought he'd be a little bit further along in terms of coming out of the All-Star break. But if there's, Ja Morant says he's a cyborg, Steven Adams is tough as hell. And if he's not ready to play, then he's not ready to play.
Yeah. And what's funny about Steven Adams is Joe, we don't have to. We've been doing it on Locked On Grizzlies all season long. We don't have to do all the talk about all the little things he brings to the table, because those little things aren't little things anymore, Joe. No. They're massive. people, I've never seen Taylor Jenkins complain about rebounding the way he has. Over that last stretch, before the All-Star break and that West Coast road trip, a lot of it was rebound. And it's like, this is something you never hear them complain about. I'm talking to Xavier Tillman in the locker room one day, and I'm talking to him about rebounding. And he's like, actually, rebounding is something I'm emphasizing, but actually it's my screening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, screening? Oh, yeah, Steven Adams, right? And he is, yeah. Him and Steven Adams are looking at stuff. And after the game, I'm watching him and Jaren Jackson interact. And they're not talking about alley-oops. They're not talking about, oh, yeah, this flashy pass that Ja made. He's talking about a screen. He said, did you see the screen? I said, like, all of that is a product of a culture that Steven Adams has helped establish, in Memphis. So this guy is huge. He's important. We don't have to even emphasize that part of it anymore because we've seen how the Grizzlies have struggled. And Joe, one of my favorite Twitter pages, and I'm sure you like it as well, is the Steven Adams stat page, right?
Yeah, they get mad at me sometimes, that page.
Yeah.
Them and everybody else on Twitter.
A lot of people get mad at you, Joe. I don't think that's something that makes them stand out.
That's a fair point.
But check out these numbers, the Steven Adams stat page, Funnicky Stats on Twitter, said Steven Adams has played 118 games for the Grizzlies and has the ... best win percentage of any player in franchise history. Best on and off plus minus of any player in franchise history. Best offensive rating of any player in franchise history. These numbers, 10, 12 games ago, you could have just said, hey, well, he plays with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane. He kind of got here during a 56-win season. Yeah, of course he has the best win percentage, best plus minus. But then you think about it. Then you see the Grizzlies play an extended period of time. Remember when this injury first happened, Joe, we've seen the Grizzlies play an extended period without Ja. They managed. We've seen them play an extended period without Des. Struggled initially, but kind of started to right the ship toward the end. We've seen them basically be on a win streak while Dillon Brooks was out when Zion Williams stepped into the lineup and they were playing really good basketball last January into February. Jaren Jackson Jr. started the season missing games. The Grizzlies were able to kind of, tread water, on the defensive end, but they were pretty good offensively as well. So they kind of stayed afloat without Jaren. What we've seen with them without Steven Adams is definitely we haven't seen the Grizzlies struggle just overall in the way that they have. So I think, that emphasizes what all he brings to the table, Joe. And I'm sure, you can hit more on just, how important of a piece, this guy is, to this team.
Well, he and Dillon Brooks are very similar in terms of the physicality they bring, right?
Yeah.
Steven Adams, his screening is just so strong and so physical. When you have a backcourt like Ja Morant and Desmond Bane that is so skilled, we talk a lot about the athleticism of Morant. I think I've said multiple times, you've agreed, his handle is underrated. He's not Kyrie Irving, but he has a very good handle. And when you combine his athletic ability with his ability to dribble and create, the more space that you can give Morant to work with, the faster he can close it. And I think that the best way to see that is when he and Adams are together. He can find an open space, like a running back in football, find the gap, fill the space. Adams is the quintessential offensive lineman. He creates that space for these guys to operate, and they miss him when he's not there. You'll notice that neither of the players we brought up were Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, or Jaren Jackson Jr. And
that's what they thought they would hear. They thought we were going to take the easy way out and say Ja, right?
Those three guys, at this point, I think it's fair to assume that they are going to produce. In order for this Grizzlies team to maintain their current stronghold on the 2 seed and even build upon it, because it's unlikely they catch Denver at this point. In order for them to stay the 2, they have to have a healthy Steven Adams, which hopefully in the next week they'll get, and they need Dillon Brooks to not be such a liability on the offensive end. The good news is we know Steven Adams will come back and be productive. We've seen it. And again, the larger sample size suggests that Dillon Brooks is bad offensively, but he's not this bad. So I'm optimistic, Damichael, about these two. What about you?
And I want to add,
please,
one more thing on Steven Adams, and this will add to the optimism on his part. the way he plays, Joe, it's kind of funny. I thought about this the other day. The way he plays doesn't really allow him to slump.
No.
When
there's nothing that really
when Ja came back from the knee injury, December 2021, and he basically said, he was a little rusty. He had to work his way back in. Desmond Bane, as we saw, remember when he came back earlier this season, had to work his way in. Jaren, same thing, had to work his way back in. The way Steven Adams, set the screen. There's no slump. Maybe with the just readjusting to the speed of the game and where he makes those backdoor passes and things like that. But overall, basically the point is he can kind of have it going, quicker than a lot of these guys and get back into a groove. And they're going to need him to, because, you mentioned 25 games left. He's going to miss, the first few. So you're probably going to have him for about 20 games, to close down the season, and you're going to need him for every single one. And so I'm optimistic about that one. Dillon, super optimistic about the defense. We'll see, how the offense carries itself. You just need him to knock down some shots. It's just not. I will say this: Dillon Brooks is taking better shots. I know, from time to time there's still the fadeaways over contested people and things like that. But for the most part, I don't think when you see him take an open three, it's just like, hey, well, he was open. But teams are giving him that more. We saw it with Boston, right? We saw it with Golden State. They were doubling Ja and basically saying, Dillon's over there. That's because he's shooting 31% from three-point range. So he has to knock down a few more of those. Teams will respect him. But the optimism is there for both of those guys. And Steven Adams in particular, one reason why the optimism is there, Joe, is because you need him for matchups like this one coming up against Joel Embiid.
Yeah, they're going to miss him tremendously on Thursday night. And it's a heck of a matchup to start the sprint to the postseason with. We're going to talk Grizzlies 76ers next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host and good friend, Damichael Cole, beat writer about the Memphis Grizzlies for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis. We've been talking players that are going to be important for Memphis to hold on to the 2 seed that aren't named Ja, Jaren, and Dez. And one of them, Steven Adams, is going to be absent in the game against the Philadelphia 76ers on Thursday. There are other players that are going to be absent. Luke Kennard is not playing in this game due to a non-COVID illness. And it was good to see that it's not COVID, because I think they announced relatively early that he wasn't going to play. And I was like, oh gosh, is this going to be a long-term thing? But hopefully, Luke is back for the weekend because Memphis is back at home against the Nuggets on Saturday night. LaRavia still with the G League. Kenneth Lofton Jr., excuse me, two-way transfer down with the G League. Zaire Williams, which kind of surprised me since since Luke Kennard is not there.
Sometimes, he may get called up before the game.
Right.
There is the possibility. I think Zaire will end up, especially with Luke being out, he'll end up getting called up.
I hope so.
But you bring up an important point. The fact that he's being, sent down back and forth, we touched on it when he was first sent down. It's who knows how long this process will be drawn out.
Yeah.
But
not great. Not great. So that hopefully gets better for him. And I hope you're right. And that changes. Somebody in the comments later on, if they watch it in the afternoon, could say, oh, they did it. You're exactly right, Damichael. And, Damichael is often exactly right. The big thing in this game for me, Damichael, is Embiid, right? And how he and Harden play so well together.
He is incredible this year.
Yeah. Harden is doing a lot in terms of assists and the way that he creates offense for guys. Old friend DeAnthony Melton's having a really strong season off the bench. Tyrese Maxey's a really strong player for them. Harris with Tennessee ties, Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
So there are talented weapons on this Philly team. And if the Memphis Grizzlies are a championship contender, which we could debate back and forth on that, they are a top 5 or 6 team in the NBA. The Philadelphia 76ers are also a top 5 or 6 team in the NBA. So I am hopeful that they are going to continue with some of the things that they did before the All-Star break and let Jaren and Clark start as the 5 and the 4 respectively. That's leaning into Embiid being the primary assignment of Jaren, but I want to make Embiid work on the other end, if that makes sense. If Xavier Tillman is the starting five and Embiid can defend him, no offense to X, he's not the weapon offensively that Jaren Jackson Jr. can be. I think that it gives them a little bit more athleticism. They are kind of punting the rebounding, to your point that we talked about earlier in the show. So X starting would not be surprising. But again, if you're looking for a poor man Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman barely does that. I would lean into playing your best players more. And in my opinion, your five best right now are Ja, Des, Brooks, Clark, and Jaren. Might as well ride that until Adams returns, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Allow me to counter, partner. Allow me to counter.
Please do.
My thing, I agree. You know, when you talk about your five best, Brandon Clark is a part of that. But as we've seen, they haven't had a set. You know, Xavier Tillman Sr. has started some games. Brandon Clark has started some games. And what I've gathered from it is it's been matchup based for the most part.
Sure.
We pretty much could have guessed, you know, that Utah, you know, playing against the Jazz, the way Utah was shooting 3-pointers against the Grizzlies, that it made perfect sense for, you know, Brandon Clark to get the starts in those games because, you know, it's switchability, able to stay attached to, you know, the shooters on those teams, the Mullinax, you know, the Markkanens and so forth. But in this game, Joel Embiid is one of the, you know, more physically imposing and nimble centers in the NBA.
Yeah, he's a physical freak.
You talk about, you know, I remember when they played the Blazers and Xavier Tillman got the start in that game because they were going against Joseph Nurkic. Now, another center who's 7'1", 270, 280, and he moves, you know, similarly to a Karl Anthony Towns who gave, you know, the Grizzlies trouble. And Xavier Tillman was probably your best option because he was able to be physical and move, you know, somewhat laterally. I think at the end of the day, you're going to have to double him in this game, which means PJ Tucker should get some open shots, and you live with that. DeAnthony Melton, who's been starting for the Sixers as of late, and I'll touch on that in a second, he should get some open shots. I mean, at the end of the day, if you guard Joel Embiid one-on-one, there's probably not a team in the league that can. And we've seen him toast pretty much everyone. And he's a tough guy to deal with. He gets to the free throw line. He can score at the three-pointer. He can score in the mid-range. He can score around the rim. So there's no one way to stop him. The Grizzlies will throw doubles at him. You know, I think Xavier Tillman should be your primary assignment because, you know, he can kind of, you know, hold his own until that double come a little bit more. Than some of the other guys. I know you mentioned Jaren. I'm a fan of that in spurts, but again, Joel Embiid is one of the best in the NBA at getting to the free throw line, and we know, you know, that tendency could probably lead to a couple fouls for Jaren, and then now, you know, he's out of the game. I like it more when Jaren, you know, you have X on him, and Jaren can come from the weak side. Or he can come and get the blocks from behind and things like that and kind of impact the play in that way. So I think that helps out as well. But, you know, that's where things start. But here's another concern I have. I want to just hear what you have to say about this too is Tyrese Maxey comes off the bench now, and he's still producing like crazy. You know, DeAnthony Melton starting lineup, PJ Tucker, I think, you know, Tobias Harris, however, they work those things out. But Tyrese Maxey has been an energizer off the bench. The Grizzlies, no Luke Kennard. You're going to have Tyus Jones. You mentioned Brandon Clark, who may potentially start. So the bench is going to be a little bit shorthanded. I'm kind of a little bit worried about how the Grizzlies are going to match up, you know, when that second unit comes in the game and Tyrese Maxey gives, you know, the Sixers that bolt.
John Conchar, baby. Oh, let's get jitty with it.
It comes.
No, it's probably not going to end well. You know, the Grizzlies are only, as of this recording, 4-point underdogs. FanDuel, which is mildly surprising, to be honest with you. I thought it would be a little bit higher. Maybe, you know, they haven't taken into account how important Steven Adams to this team, or who's going to eat those Luke Kennard minutes with him out. You know, maybe Santi Aldama plays on the wing a little bit more, especially when Tobias Harris is playing the three, which they do from time to time. Philly, they don't do it as much as they used to. But when they go big, you know, they can certainly play Aldama at the three with the 76ers matchup wise. Philly is favored in this game, and they should be, to be honest with you. I think the Grizzlies, have a tall task ahead of them. They're going to need the pre-toe injury Desmond Bane. They're going to need, 25 points. They're going to need Ja Morant to get 30 points. They're going to have to take advantage of that backcourt. Melton is a good defender, but he's an opportunistic one, right? He's looking for playing passing lanes. He's looking to disrupt rhythm in that way. The Grizzlies can take advantage of that. And again, James Harden is not known for his defensive prowess. So I think the Grizzlies backcourt will have opportunity. It's going to be on the bench to at least maintain whatever. Don't let the gap get bigger, if that makes sense. Maybe they're not able to build a lead, but if they can just hold steady in that Grizzlies starting core group of the four, Jaren, Ja, Dez, and Dillon Brooks, those guys are the ones that hopefully can build up a lead a little bit. So it's going to be an interesting game in Philadelphia. I know you'll be interested in it. Your old neck of the woods, so to speak, before you came back to Memphis. You were there in Philly. So again, the Damichael Cole Bowl on Thursday night. And I'm sure you'll be watching. And I know our wonderful Locked On Grizzlies audience will be watching as well. Thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. The next time Locked On Grizzlies goes live, it'll be Friday. This week has flown by. We'll talk Grizzlies 76ers, the outcome of that contest and all those fun things. Who played well, who didn't, who looked like they're still on the beach somewhere in Florida or Mexico, wherever they might have gone. And we'll also take a look at the Nuggets game coming up on Saturday. The Grizzlies will be off after Saturday's game until Tuesday, which is good, especially for, Steven Adams and additional practice. Hopefully they're closer to full strength by that game on Tuesday against the Lakers. So we'll preview a little bit, and we will obviously talk about Grizzlies Sixers on our next episode. Thank you so much for listening, rating, reviewing, commenting, liking, subscribing. Hopefully, most importantly, much appreciated. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies part of your NBA and Grizzlies experience. I'm thankful for my co-host, Damichael Cole. I'm glad that he was back with us on this episode. Again, continued thoughts with you and yours, Damichael. And until next time, thank you again for watching and listening. Enjoy the game tonight. Grizzlies basketball is back. Stay locked in. This is Locked On Grizzlies. See you tomorrow.